everybody, it's Lynn Hayes. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the astrology of the upcoming week between July 13th and July 20th. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that Mercury is now no longer retrograde. Yay! Mercury is direct. That means that it has just changed direction. It's going to take a week or so before its momentum picks up, and during this period we are still not quite back to normal. After Mercury turns direct, it takes about a week for things to get back to something approaching normal. We still have 5 planets retrograde right now. As you may know, between now and the middle of October, we will have between 5 and 7 planets retrograde. So there's a lot of retrograde energies. That means that we're looking back, we're having to redo a lot of things. We have to, with the situation in the world right now, we really have to be looking at our lives to see what are we going to bring into the future. It's all still very unclear what is going to be left at the end of this virus situation. And I know a lot of people are asking me, when is the virus going to level off? When are things going to get back to normal? And I'm not really sure what to say about that. Things are different in the United States than they are in the rest of the world astrologically, because we have a Pluto return that's coming up in the US chart, starting really next year within a couple of degrees and going through 2024. So I'm anticipating that things are going to be stressful in the US for quite a while. As far as when the virus is going to level off, the astrology suggests that that could possibly start to ease up, certainly after the retrogrades, not before, but possibly at the end of the year, early January. So that leads me into something else I wanted to talk about, which is harmonious aspects. And are they good or bad? And sometimes harmonious aspects are supportive and they're lovely and they give us a sense of peace and equanimity, and things just seem to flow and they just seem to work. So this year, in addition to a lot of challenging aspects with 3 planets in the sign of Capricorn, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which have all been lined up, Capricorn being the sign of foundations and structures, and so we've all had to be redoing everything that our lives are built on. But there's also been a very strong, supportive, harmonious planetary cycle that began in February, and that's a harmonious sextile, which is a 60-degree aspect between Jupiter and Neptune. So Jupiter and Neptune are connected in some ways. They both are expansive and they have to do with our ideals. Jupiter and Neptune are both the rulers of Pisces. Jupiter, of course, the traditional ruler. Neptune is the modern ruler. So they're both connected in that way. And they both are idealistic. They both promote idealism and expansion. Jupiter is a personal planet, so it has to do with our personal lives, our personality. Jupiter in the natal chart shows where we find meaning in life, what gives our life purpose. Neptune is a transpersonal planet. It inspires. It inspires creativity. It inspires transcendence. It inspires magical thinking and sometimes illusion. But when Jupiter harmonizes in a supportive aspect with Neptune, typically we get the best of both planets. Now, when I was looking ahead in January about this aspect, what I had written in my blog was that the Jupiter-Neptune sextile would probably help to soften some of the challenge of Saturn and Pluto. Well, as we now know, it didn't necessarily make life easier for us. But if you actually look at what the planets were doing, Neptune is associated with viruses, with mysterious illnesses, and Jupiter is expansive. And Jupiter did support the spread of the virus. It just didn't help us. But we can take it a step deeper. We can level down even a little bit more, because what is this virus doing for us? What is this current situation doing for us? It's pretty clear that life on planet Earth has been out of balance for quite a long time. And even though many of us are going to be hurt financially by this situation, many of us are having stress in their families. There's a lot of divorces right now, but there is, in the midst of all this sort of destruction that is being wrought by Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter all in Capricorn, there is a supportive energy with Jupiter and Neptune for rebuilding, for reimagining, for recreating. So this is, I think we have to look at it sometimes from a higher perspective. It's not always the way it seems. So I mentioned this sextile from Jupiter to Neptune, even though it won't align completely until the end of July 27th. It's within a degree or two right now, and it will be very prominent in the chart of the new moon that I'll be talking about in a few minutes. The other thing that I wanted to talk about as far as the big aspects, the big energies that we're dealing with right now, before we get into the details, is the fact that Chiron, the planet of wounding and healing, has just turned retrograde last week. If you watched last week's video, then you already know about that. But Chiron is still stationary in the sky. And as I said last week, and I think probably the week before as well, Chiron has actually been virtually stationary within a degree for the past 2 months, and it will stay stationary for the next couple of months. When Chiron is in the sign of Aries, we're having to discover who we are. But what's happening now, and a lot of this we can thank the virus for, is that the world is on pause. We are reevaluating our lives. We're recreating our sense of who we are, who we want to be, how we want to live. So that takes us into the details of what's happening this week. Probably the biggest thing of the small things, if that makes sense, is the fact that Mars, which is also in Aries, is transiting Chiron. So Mars and Chiron will be conjunct in the sky on the 14th of July. When Mars transits Chiron, it can trigger some of these old wounds to emerge so that we can resolve them. So just watch for that this week. There can be hurt feelings. There's a lot of energy that's very unfocused right now. Mars is in Aries anyway, and the square to Chiron can trigger some difficult energies and difficult emotions, but it can also help us, once these things are triggered, to be able to release and resolve them. So that's going to go on for much of the week. In the early part of the week, so between July 12th and the 15th or so, the Sun, which is in Cancer, will be opposite Jupiter and Pluto, and then eventually Saturn at the new moon. So the Sun illuminates whatever it comes into contact, and Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are traveling retrograde through Capricorn. They are, it's sort of like a bulldozer. The bulldozer sort of starts tearing things down, and then you have to look and see what's left. How can I rebuild? So the Sun helps us to see that more clearly. The Sun is opposite Jupiter, so that can help us to feel confident. The Sun is opposite Pluto, which may cause us to feel greater fear, more intensity. And then by the time we get to the new moon, which is on July 20th, the new moon is opposite Capricorn. We'll talk about that in a minute, because that's another important thing for this week. So by the time the solar aspect is done around the 15th, then on the 16th, and you might start to feel this on the 15th, usually the fast-moving transits last for a day or two. So Venus in the sky, Venus having to do with relationships, how we relate to other people, how we feel about ourselves. Venus is going to be in a square to Chiron. So that's another planetary energy that can cause us to feel some disruption in our personal relationships, to have hurt feelings, to feel some abandonment and maybe that we don't fit in, and just that sort of difficulty and challenge can come up. Just remember, when these things happen under a Chiron transit, which they often do when we have these intense emotional things, they're coming up because they're ready to be released. You know, a lot of times when we feel those things, we just want to kind of stuff them down, put them in a box. But ideally, we can just release them. We can breathe through them. We can be in the present moment, allow the energy of the emotion to just become more diffuse and then ultimately just dissipate entirely. So it can be a wonderfully liberating experience. And that's a good segue to the new moon. So the new moon is at the 28th degree of Cancer. The sun and the moon are conjunct in the sky, and they are opposite Saturn exactly. And Saturn, you might remember, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are all traveling together in the sky. So the new moon in Cancer brings our focus and our attention into the emotions, into the feelings, the realm of feelings, the realm of caring for others, and who is my tribe, and who am I connected to? Where do I feel at home? Who do I feel at home with? These are all questions of this new moon in Cancer. And it's the second new moon in Cancer that we've had. The first one was, of course, a month ago. So there's really been an emphasis in this idea of finding our tribe and finding our sense of ourselves within ourselves, where we feel comfortable, where we feel safe. So the Capricorn planets say, okay, enough emotions, enough feelings. Now it's time to do what has to be done. Now it's time to be responsible. So that's sort of the theme of this new moon that's coming up. So this week I'm starting something new. I want to talk a little bit about where the moon is traveling, because the lunar shifts help us to focus a little more on certain areas of our lives. So this video will be posted on July 13th and at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please adjust for your own time zone. The moon is going to move into Taurus. The moon is generally in a sign for a couple of days. While the moon is in Taurus, our attention is really focused on comfort, on affluence, on abundance, on security. So when the moon is in Taurus, it's a wonderful time to be out in nature, to be surrounded by green things, to maybe plant in your garden or repot a plant. While the moon is in Taurus, we feel more connected to nature. So it's a wonderful opportunity to become more grounded and to become more centered. And then on the 16th of July at 1:19 a.m. Eastern Time, the moon moves into Gemini. And then we become more active. Then we become more curious. That's not a great time to plan to focus for a full day on one project. When the moon is in Gemini, we're generally very active. We want to keep moving. We want to learn. We're curious. We want to have conversations with this person and that person. So it's a wonderful time to be taking in information, to be reading, to be writing. We can be very productive as writers, certainly. And then the moon moves into Cancer on July 18th, and that will be at 10:24 Eastern Time. The moon will not be new yet. It will have just moved into Cancer, but it will all of a sudden shift our energy towards the emotional realm, towards the realm of connecting with other people and really feeling the need to take care of each other, which is an important thing right now. Probably to do some cooking, to maybe make some food for somebody. But mostly with Cancer, it's just feeling and giving yourself the permission to be vulnerable. That takes us into the new moon in Cancer, which is on the 20th. And then at 1:33 p.m. on the 20th Eastern Time, the moon will move from Cancer into Leo. And then it's all about me or you. Then it becomes all about How do we want our lives to be? What kind of shape do we want to give our lives? How can we find the truest expression of who we really are at our best selves? How can we really express that pure radiance of who we truly, truly are? So that seems like a wonderful place to stop. I want to thank you so much for being with me. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time.